Welcome to the 10-Star Happy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Brennan Robinson, and welcome to the first episode. Here with me today is Philip Wilhelm. Philip, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a model.
Yeah, we can clearly see.
I wish. So my background is in marketing. I started in design, and from there started basically exploring all the digital aspects. I remember in college, in our marketing classes, I would be asking myself, why aren't we learning about like marketing automation? Why aren't we learning about online marketing and the nuances and technologies and
all these things that may matter.
Yeah. And, I saw where things were going, and my early career was started in web design and graphic design, and then started diving way deeper into the systems and technology that run, the cloud and the internet. And I've always had a fascination with marketing just because of the design, but then I've also enjoyed from my competitive background, the challenge of getting someone to buy something or to essentially, utilize some service from a company and whatnot. So I've been in both spheres. I've worked in multiple industries, and I've thoroughly enjoyed ticketing because you get an inside view into the event operations, and you get to learn a lot about the challenges that both our clients but other event managers and promoters face. And so it's been fascinating.
Yeah.
I've learned a ton, especially from the team here, but also from our clients, just to see kind of how they do things, so.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If you joined us at IAFE 2023 in Salt Lake City this past year, we talked about dark social at our workshop, which Philip led that workshop there at IAFE. This podcast is a follow-up, and it's about dark social. We're going to dive deeper into dark social, talk more about it, answer some of the questions that some of you had at IAFE. And if you didn't join us at IAFE, this is a very important, relevant topic. If you're coming from a fair, air show, any event, the way we kick off these podcasts is we start with a beverage of choice. So the beverage of choice for today is a gin and tonic. I picked up this Eden Mill Love Gin in honor of Valentine's Day coming up.
And your love for ticketing.
And my love for ticketing, absolutely. We've got some tonic water here. I wish I had real lemons. I just got lemon juice. If you're making this cocktail ever at home, use lemon or a lime. Lime works too. And this gin and tonic for two. We're going to do 4 ounces of gin.
I would have loved to be squeezing some lemons, some fresh juice.
I know. I figured that.
We'll get our cups ready, because that's probably the most important piece here.
Right.
A 10-star mugs. Soon to come to our online merch store, right, Brennan?
Yeah. 10-star merch shop. That's right. All right. So we've got our gin. Let's go ahead and do 8 ounces of tonic water. And again, this recipe is for 2.
Or just 1.
We're just if you're drinking by yourself,
depending on how hard of a
day
cut
this in half. Cut it in half,
or double it.
This
is a safe place for people. And is our goal to drink the full cocktail by the end of this podcast?
Yeah, my hope is that happens for all of our podcasts.
Yeah,
we drink all of this. If we didn't, then it'll be finished quickly afterwards. All right. Put the lid on that. We need to get a little bar shelf going.
Yeah.
Over here.
And kind of have all the different alcohols collected. So do you put ice in this?
Yes. Yeah, start with in your glasses. We're using mugs. Start with a large ice cube, or if you like crushed ice, you can do that too. I prefer a large ice cube. And we're just going to do a splash of lemon juice, or, go ahead and put your lemon wedge, um, or lime wedge. And
Is this organic lemon juice?
do a little bit more. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's
Okay,
organic.
that's
Sure.
really important.
Yeah.
Is there a technique to the shaking? Oh, we are not stopping. Keep going.
We lost some of our drink.
Oh, this is good. This is good.
You know what? A tip. don't put tonic water in a shaker. I don't think you're supposed to do that, Phil. What do you think? Just spilled gin and tonic everywhere. Don't do what I just did. We're not professional.
No, that clearly
bartenders.
you did not bartend in college.
That was not a job that I had. Yeah, do not put tonic water in a shaker, or the lid will blow off.
Okay.
There we go. We learned something today.
Oh my gosh.
well, hopefully we can definitely finish these, because there's really
cheers.
not much in there. Cheers
To knowledge.
to learning.
Oh, that's good. It'd be nice next time if we had ice.
Yeah, definitely use ice. We need a little ice maker in here.
Yeah.
Maybe when we get our bar shelf going, we can get one of those small ice makers.
They sell them.
Just plug in the wall. All right, Phil. Here we go. Let's talk about dark social. Phil, tell us what dark social is. We'll start there.
So, I guess it's nothing having to do with the dark web. No
Right.
conspiracy theories. Maybe that could be another podcast where we wear our tinfoil hats. But essentially, dark social was first coined by a journalist named Alexis Madrigal. I probably just butchered his last name, but he was a journalist from The Atlantic. He was essentially highlighting the fact that when he was looking at their analytics and reporting, that he was finding that basically 60% of all their social traffic was originating from these unattributable sources. So dark social is kind of a hybrid concept of both a combination of actions that are happening that can't be tracked, and also just this overarching kind of theme of behaviors from the consumer, where if I want to promote an event or I see something, an interesting article, I'm going to distribute that information, whether it's through an app, an email, word of mouth, and these sources you can't essentially track. And so that's essentially kind of a kindergartner version of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And, I guess that leads into talking about, why is dark social so important, and why does it matter to us? Why does it matter to, your marketing team, on your fairgrounds or for your air show? Why do we need to talk about dark social? Why is it important, Philip?
Well, I think at the end of the day, a marketing team, their single objective is obviously to be producing results. And eventually they're going to have to go back to stakeholders, whether it's the sponsors, whether it's leadership or management, and they're going to have to convey value. And unfortunately, the time that we live in now, we had kind of come from what I would argue as like the golden peak of marketing, where we had more information, more visibility, and more tracking than we ever did previously. And essentially, a lot of us and people in the industry got comfortable with this kind of notion of, if it's not being tracked, then you can't prove the value. And so a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations have, over, I would say, the last decade, have developed where you need to prove that value if you want to keep the budget and you want to keep certain initiatives and campaigns running. And because of just 2016 onward with all the privacy law changes and regulations that started coming from the EU and affecting us.
And they continue to crack down on that.
Right. Every state's pushing new laws. And some countries are like even outright wanting to ban Google Analytics and certain types of tracking. And so we're in this area of just nothing but uncertainty. And I like to say that being an online marketing professional or someone that having to do with digital marketing, you're like an Olympic sprinter because you've got to literally stay at a pace where constant innovation and changes are happening in the industry almost every few months. But kind of getting back to why it's important, most, at least from the standpoint of like fairs, I think a lot of teams are realizing that all these changes definitely have an impact on their operations, on their attribution, and what they use to kind of quantify comprehensively what's working and what isn't. And just the changes in iOS, where iOS 14, they rolled out their kind of new privacy initiative where all these different kind of restrictions were put in place to protect the consumer, ended up changing the landscape literally overnight for businesses. And coupled with new laws and regulations, it's only complicated the day-to-day operations for marketing teams.
Yeah.
So if you're not aware of it, you better be, because it's already affecting a lot of the reporting and insights you're learning. And if you are aware of it, you need to quickly pivot. The window of time was, I would argue, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, to start like testing and experimenting with different kind of approaches and strategies, knowing where we would be. Well, we're here now. And I guess the digital landscape has only become more complicated.
Yep.
But my job's also to say that there is hope, but expectations and assumptions also need to be managed, carefully managed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in this industry, it's so important to be able to paint the ticket buyer journey, paint that picture, and, understand, what's working well and what's not. And, with dark social, we need to understand, how that impacts those analytics and the numbers that we actually see. And we need to get an idea for, okay, what actually is true, what is real. There's some ways, tips, and tricks that we'll talk about that can help you, reveal some of that data, and prevent it being hidden from dark social. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But specifically, Philip, how does it really just impact your analytics right off the bat?
Well, at the core of dark social, there's all of these methods and communication channels and mediums that aren't being tracked, and they can't be. So if you heavily rely on, let's say, Google Analytics, you're going to see basically a lot of direct traffic, but then your referral, your social media sources are going to be substantially lower. And I guess that's where it kind of comes into play with managing your expectations. If your primary analytics tool, let's say it's Google, for most it is, if that is your single source of truth, you're in trouble. Basically, you're blind. Everything's foggy and you're looking through a foggy window. Mm-hmm. And to be making business decisions and long-term planning all around that, I think that's short-sighted. So it's kind of ironic where, we've come with all this innovation, and now I almost feel like, in a good way, we're being brought to the marketing 101 fundamentals, where we're being encouraged to do experimentation, A/B testing, lift analysis, segmentation, and looking at what was like core practice in the old days of advertising. And now people are having to basically reset and going back to, hey, both from a gut instinct, but also from controlled kind of tests and experimentation, we're validating these theories. Now, this single platform or the single tool is not saying what we're saying over here, but, there's multiple ways to kind of look at the problem, especially attack the problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the oldest, I guess, example of dark social would be, word of mouth. And that's always been around.
Yep.
Um, when you send an email campaign out, and the recipient shows their friend or shows a family member, shows them that email on their phone, or just talks about the event coming up. um, we can't attribute that.
Yeah, you can't measure it.
There's no way to measure that.
And it's ironic on that point how most budgets get put into that first click attribution. So 70% of the budgets are being attributed to that.
Yeah.
And the other, I mean, there's a misalignment too, where if you look at it as one advertising strategy delivering basically the end goal of a purchase, that's very, very narrow-minded. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you look at everything you're doing, from demand creation to basically all the promotions and different media sources you're using, those all work together hand in hand. And it's funny how many of the events that we end up working with, where it's the first time, they end up realizing, I think, at the end of it, how important that first interaction to the last interaction. And by last interaction, that's them leaving the event. First interaction being their ticket buying experience. Yeah. And all this time in between leading to the very end where they're getting out. I mean, it can be great up until the point that some parking lot attendant ruins it, creates a traffic jam, people can't leave. And then that is what people remember. Mm-hmm. It's sad because all this hard work and energy was put into it, but it can basically take a tailspin.
Yeah.
By missing a few of the important details. And that's, I mean, we do a ton of marketing, but we also do a ton of just what I would argue common sense strategy, looking holistically.
Right.
And I guess kind of getting back to dark social, some interesting findings, not to scare everyone, but there was a study done by AddThis, which is the social kind of bookmarking share widget that you can embed on a website. They found that Facebook accounted for 28% of their social sharing, while 70% of the sharing was coming from these dark social channels that they couldn't measure. And most sites I go to, they utilize AddThis, the social share widget. And it just basically illustrates how important it is to track and analyze your own traffic, but also better understanding where the majority of your user engagement's coming from.
Yeah.
And I know another study that was done by Radium One found that 84% of all shared content was done through dark social media channels. And that means a majority of the content that was being shared online wasn't being tracked.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no kind of silver bullet to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I think it's more important than ever that marketing departments are properly educating leadership on these new changes, and also being more equipped that you can't measure your job performance off of values in one of these analytic reports. You're going to have to quantify everything and measure your performance and how effective your strategies are and how they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we do here at a 10-star are the post-event surveys. And after the checkout process, we'll ask, how did you hear about the event?
Right.
After the event's over, we'll ask the same question. And seeing the results of those two surveys and, comparing those results, they're very different. Pretty much every single event, and that's just people, if you buy a ticket to an event, several weeks before the event happens, I mean, maybe you forget, or maybe you just don't care. You're just going to, select an answer and move on. But seeing how different those results are is very interesting. But it gives us a huge understanding of, what's working well, where attendees are coming from, how are they hearing about the event, whether it's billboard, radio, TV, Digital marketing campaigns. Did they hear about the event on Facebook? Did they see a Facebook ad? Did they see, the event was happening on your website? Did they receive an email campaign? We take all of those results and wrap them up together and provide that data to you in a post-event summary. So after the event, we just look at everything that we did marketing-wise, get feedback from the ticket buyers in a post-event survey as well. What did you like about the event? What didn't you like about the event? And in regards to dark social, I think it helps clear up some things for us.
Well, and going back to, for instance, this idea of analyzing even the ticket buyer experience and their journey, asking at checkout and asking at the end of the event, what we found when I basically did like an 8-month aggregated study was for those at the end of the event, when we were just comparing the two from checkout to leaving the event when they got their survey, for Facebook and Instagram being the attributed channel, there was an 8% difference. For friends and family, there was a 10% difference. Event website had a 15% increase in what was actually being credited. And then search engines was a 14% increase. Radio was a 2% decrease. And email, 7% increase. And it's interesting, I guess, thinking about the psychology of what people recall as the last touch point. And I think it's important for marketers to understand that when you are surveying your consumers and your attendants or your patrons, to understand kind of some of the psychology involved and when it is you're asking certain types of questions. But overall, the average that we found was the social media played a huge part in contributing just to the awareness of how they responded, saying that, yes, I learned about it through Facebook, where friends basically take second place, word of mouth referrals. And then the event website was in third place, search engine and radio were in fourth respectively, and then email last. But what's most interesting is all the people that were checking out, as we know, the only way that they got there initially when we do our pre-sale and unlock code campaigns was through email.
Yeah.
And there was no social media involved until typically the start of once everything goes on sale. And so even email marketing being one of the cheapest, most cost-effective mediums will get the lowest attributed credit. But if you understand how everything works, the marketing machine as it relates to your guys' event, and kind of the order of priorities and what's getting the early investment with what's getting, investment later. If you guys have radio ads running, in the last 3 to 4 weeks of when the event starts, understanding that will also help you understand how to measure whether or not those strategies are effective.
Yeah. And what's it take? 30 touch points to convert someone to a customer?
I would argue probably more nowadays.
I mean, even being more, just 30 alone. Think about 30 different touch points. What opportunities are you giving, your prospects, your prospect customers? What opportunities are you giving them to get all of those 30 touch points?
Well, I think consistency is the name of the game.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest compliment I've seen with us working with events is when either we're given kind of purview to take the initiative, build out a full schedule, and execute it. We do a good job, and our event marketing team does a phenomenal job at following through on the deliverables. And what would you say the average event from a marketing standpoint, even just with email specifically, would you say that we send maybe 12, maybe more?
Yeah, 12 to 15 email campaigns on average.
And there's a specific cadence. Yeah. We're not going to reveal all of our trade secrets, but we have a cadence, and it's very strategically adapted for each of the clients we work with. But the follow through, we don't miss a beat.
Yeah.
And then when there's marketing teams involved or outside agencies, we've seen it work incredibly well where that agency is focusing on whatever medium that they're going to be working in while we're working on focusing on What are the things that the ticket buyer cares about? What are the things that on the ticket sales page need to be communicated, and so forth? And a lot of even the information that we put into our campaigns is getting distributed, outside of attributable means.
Yeah.
So it's definitely insightful too when you consider us having to prove our own value to the client. Just the challenges we even face, and I know a lot of events face when they're considering sponsors and the partners involved, budgets and overall investments.
Yeah, and that's the name of the game. I mean, we want to create better results and profitable events, for our clients. And I think that any, marketing agency, your marketing team, they're going to have a similar focus. They're going to have the same focus. We want a better event, more profitable event. And how are we going to get there? And it truly does take a dedicated team to do that for you on any capacity. Whether you have a small county fair, or whether you have a big state fair, or a major jet team coming to your air show. On any level, it's so important, and we want to stress that throughout all of our podcasts, not just this one. Whether we're talking about marketing specifically, or ticketing, or logistics. So, that leads me into another question, Philip. What are some more examples of dark social, just so that we can bring them top of mind to all the listeners? And how do we measure dark social specifically?
So I think I gave the example of, you see an upcoming event, maybe it's an artist. I don't know if you're a Taylor Swift fan. You seem like
I'm a huge Swiftie.
Yeah, I was going to say
Swiftie.
That. So you see they're coming to town. You're excited. You end up sharing, let's say, the news article with your best friend, and you guys both plan the time you're going to get your Taylor Swift tattoos to the time you're going to go and attend the concert.
Wow, tattoos. I'm not at that point.
I think
I'm not there. Maybe I'm close.
We could do a podcast just on Taylor Swift alone, I think, for you. But that would be a good example where online there's some sort of resource, whether it's the news article or a Facebook post, but you take that link or that URL and you end up sharing it through the app of your choice. So do you use WhatsApp?
No.
Okay. Well, WhatsApp, I think, has well over 2 billion users.
Lots of people use WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I don't, but yeah.
And then whether it's, I think Facebook Messenger, I think has like 500 million, probably more now.
Yeah, that's probably what I use the most, Facebook Messenger.
And so you would share it, right, to one of your friends. Uh-huh. And so at that point, that friend then opens it on their phone, and it's not going to say, hey, this particular visitor came from Facebook Messenger.
Right.
And unfortunately, this happens all the time. Same with an email. Mm-hmm. Now, there's strategies, though, that we have started adopting, and we've done a good job in, I think it was early 2021, where we just started pivoting and putting a heavy emphasis in one of our features, Attendalytics, where everything we create has a link. And then that link is basically being tracked on a value standpoint of, did it actually convert? How many visitors? And then we also cross-reference that to Google Analytics independently. And from the standpoint of measuring, you can take a few different approaches. One being use a short URL service like Bitly. Google has their own. And there's a term called the short URL or a vanity URL. I'm in favor of the vanity URL just because you get to change the presentation of that URL structure. And actually, instead of it being alphanumeric, you can have different texts and breaks in the text, whether it's hyphens, dots, whatever. But I've found that coupling that with essentially the UTM parameters, where you actually add like, hey, the medium is email, or the medium's print, or the medium is social media, that you can then further track it, where a dedicated QR code, for instance, could actually be linked to one of these short URLs. That short URL would obviously redirect them to the page that they want to send them to, but they would also pass in those UTM parameters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be honest, I think you would probably agree, right, that it's a lot of work keeping track of all these different parameters if you're using UTM codes, right?
Absolutely.
And it starts to add up and compound with time. But if you're diligent with it, from a standpoint of knowing that you look in Google Analytics, if it has 60% or even 70% of the information you need and it's going to be accurate and you're consistent, it'll make that research and insight that you pull from it a lot more accurate.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, would you probably say that a lot of the clients who end up, I guess, taking the initiative of creating these links and URLs, there's always some sort of mistake, whether it's forgetting the HTTP to the HTTPS?
Yeah. More times than not, I think with UTM specifically, it's come up with a strategy beforehand and be consistent. Um, you know, whether you have a unique campaign, UTM campaign value for that specific campaign. Stay consistent with it. Don't change it up. Don't just throw in random UTMs, because once you get into Google Analytics, and you want to see uniform data, and you want to be able to wrap that data up into specific reports. And staying consistent is just terribly important.
Right.
When it comes to
you'd
UTMs.
have to become an Excel whiz or Google Sheets whiz when you data dump that stuff, because it's like, oh,
Yep.
I have a different spelling now for
Right.
this, basically this parameter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough, if you aren't checking your links for HTTP to HTTPS, it's the simplest mistake you can make.
Yeah.
Because what most people don't realize is when it redirects, you might be like, well, Phil, it's going to send me to HTTPS. Yes. But what it's also going to likely do is it's going to remove the referral source. Bye-bye. It's going to remove all the parameters.
There it goes.
And you're at the mercy of whatever web server and technology that site or URL is using.
Yeah.
So the other aspect, and this is probably the bigger aspect of strategies that should be implemented to kind of minimize this dark social with like unattributable, reported areas, is using social listening tools.
Yeah.
There's a few tools out there. Actually, there's dozens of tools out there, but my favorite is Google Alerts. It's simple. It's free. You can sign up and register an alert for daily, weekly notices. And it basically works off of providing keywords. So you basically would set up a variety of different keywords, and it would be scraping all the different public, websites, URLs, forums, communities that the search engine can find. And then it would notify you, hey, there's been some talk about, your event, or let's say your brand or your venue on these following websites. And I know I depend on it, and I know we use it a ton for our clients, but it's probably one of the simplest free things you can implement. Hootsuite's got it. I think SEMrush has it, Brandwatch, Talkwalker, some of these different tools, but that's probably the first layer of the onion, and it's the first line of defense, where it would at least give you insight into being like, man, there's a lot of people on X, or formerly known Twitter, that are just stuck in traffic or stuck because of this issue or having these problems. And if you can get ahead of it, you can minimize, thousands, hundreds of thousands of lost revenue. I mean, we've seen it where, hey, the weather's going to be terrible tomorrow, I'm not going.
Yeah.
So, whoa. I mean, the one thing I've learned in Tennessee is the weather is temperamental here, coming from the West Coast.
Yeah, you never know.
And they don't know either, too, So, social listening tools, a must-have. The other piece is the customer data platform. You don't need to hire a bunch of nerds, but there are tools out there such as Segment, Rudderstack, that will allow you to aggregate all this information on your ticket buyers. And if you don't have a central system and you're doing it in Excel or a Google Sheet, or I hope no one is using like MS Access, the Microsoft database tool. Maybe they are. I'm sure someone is. But if you're doing that, you need to find a better alternative, because the data that you have in the era that we are in, everyone is responsible for their data now. First party data. So find a tool that you can use that keeps it up to date. But here's also kind of the twist to it. In COVID, with iOS 14 emerging, Apple rolled out a feature called Hide My Email. And Hide My Email has also been a game changer, both a benefit to the consumer, but like I said in the very beginning, a complicated speed bump in the road for marketing teams.
Yep.
So in any system, let's just use like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, your primary ID or record is going to be the email, right? Well, because of this new feature, that same customer, Bob, let's use Bob as an example, Bob may have his email in your system, but then he may go and purchase a ticket using the Hide My Email. And now you have two records of Bob in your system. So there's an importance of actually going back through your email database and scrubbing, especially if it's bouncing. That's probably the easiest way. We don't charge, we don't charge for subscribers or contacts that we have when we send emails, unlike some of the other platforms. And if you're spending money on your volume of contacts, you're going to need to be constantly maintaining that list. But my challenge to everyone is go look at your emails that you have in your database. Look for the domain iCloud.com, everything after the @ and start looking at all of the first part of the email address. And you'll see these weird structures where it'll be like a word or an adjective and a set of numbers, something outside of like, Iron Man, 22, like I might have for an email, or, Bob's Construction at Gmail or iCloud. Look for something outside of the norm, and that'll be evident of how many people are actually using this feature.
Yeah.
So even your own campaigns, you've got to strategize on like, I might be sending one offer a better value than another, that might be getting a different offer and value, or how you segment your lists and whatnot.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, kind of explain, why would somebody want to use that Hide My Email feature?
Well, I think everyone probably realizes that they have so much email spam that comes in, that the benefit of a service like what Apple's providing is, I want to stop receiving emails altogether. Guaranteed.
Yep. No more marketing emails.
Done.
Just don't want
to. It's better than an unsubscribe, because somehow you get back into the subscription of getting those emails.
I'm spending too much money on these marketing emails. I don't want to buy anymore.
Right. And so, I mean, that's at the heart of it. But this is where that kind of underlying expectation really comes into play, is realizing that if you're assuming that, our email database is rock solid, and that person, that is the email that we have, it's like, it may not be, and you may have that same person have 3 other emails in your own database that you can't know about.
Yeah. And with events specifically, communication through email is terribly important, because, you need to send an email about what to know before you go, to your list of attendees. You need to give them, a notice of, severe weather, or if you, in the event of a cancellation. There are a huge number of variations of reasons why you might need to contact your attendees. For air shows specifically, something we do is we do monitor traffic getting to the show, and perhaps you can redirect attendees getting to the show. If there is a wreck, on Interstate I-40, get off at this exit before you hit the traffic. So, that experience of getting to the event is so crucial and so important for, the time that your attendees are going to have at the event. Or they, if they have a easy time parking, easy time getting through the gate, they're way more likely, we found, to spend more money on things like concessions, stay at the event longer,
right?
Enjoy everything at the event, what it has to offer.
Well, and the more informed the buyer is, the more likely they are to both let other people, friends and family know, but then at the same time, they become your advocate.
Yeah.
So when they're at the event, if they're familiar with what they need to know, then they're going to be able to be kind of like compounding that organic social media influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important too that teams and events acknowledge this component of your greatest tool is your ticket buyer. They're actually your best investment long term for marketing and keeping costs down. Do you want to spend $30,000 to $50,000 marketing your event, or would you rather be able to take $30,000 or $40,000 and invest it elsewhere, where you every year your database of attendees continues to grow, and you can notify them through text message or email that, hey, the event's coming again this year at this time at this location, bring your friends, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes perfect sense. And the better you do with communication too, the more predictable operations and whatnot end up being. And I will kind of close with one other suggestion is implementing cross-device tracking. So that's essentially allowing, when the ticket buyer goes from, let's say, the ticket sales page to the website to another kind of branded website, to be able to see that buyer journey.
Yeah, that cross-domain tracking is terribly important. And, knowing just with email marketing specifically, I'll talk about that because we do a ton of email marketing. You send a link in an email campaign to the event website, which most email campaigns, they'll go to the event website. Right. They'll go to the ticket sales page to buy tickets. If you're not set up with cross-domain tracking, you're going to lose all of your visibility on all of those recipients who click to visit the event website. Because they may visit the event website and then they may click a button on that website to go buy tickets, and you just lost your attribution there if you don't have cross-domain tracking set up.
Well, and tapping our own shoulders, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we recognize too that with a lot of these platforms, they hold certain features and capabilities tight to their chest. And I know we have a few clients that they heavily rely on being able to embed their own tracking scripts onto their ticket sales page. Mm-hmm. And I would love to learn if other event platforms actually allow you to do this, because from everything I've heard and seen, that's not a possibility.
Not a possibility.
So if you actually want to see what's happening between them coming to the checkout on our platform to what's on your event website, or the free websites that we typically offer events at no cost, you would have that full kind of visibility. Yeah. But once again, managing expectations. You can't rely on just one single tool as your source of truth. And I think that's at the heart of the problem is people have to realize that you're going to be taking the post-event surveys and surveys in general, the different A/B tests and experimentation, even the on-site interviewing as people are leaving, like, hey, what was your favorite event or activity or exhibit at our fair? Or what was your favorite act at the air show? Getting that quick feedback and collecting it, you're going to learn a lot more on how to improve it the next year.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask. Don't think it's an inconvenience, to your attendees, because it's not. It's real quick.
Well, and if you ask, most people don't ask, and they're willing to share.
And yeah, people are willing to share their opinion.
I mean, we see the surveys, and we never distribute, I would like to add, the surveys without the event's permission. We typically send it to our primary point of contact.
Yeah.
But what we found was, I think it was at the end of 2022, I put high pressure on you I want as many events to be basically receiving these surveys. And whether or not, they want to use it, we're going to ask the attendees for feedback. And so what we found was, I think it was an 85% increase in us just adopting it across the board. But what we found was, oh my gosh, this event or this, show needs to be aware of these problems happening at the venue. Why they don't have ADA compliant, seating or, signage or, safety, security. It's like, yeah, that's important. And then, the event ops team is able to say, dude, this was in our contract. What's going on? Or, hey, did you know about this volunteer team that literally walked someone to their car? Or someone was fainting, picked them up, went and got paramedics. Like, this is a success story.
Yeah.
Like, bravo.
Right.
So those kind of things, I mean, you'll learn more about your team probably from the customer's perspective than just watching and observing.
Yeah. Super cool. Very, very cool. Philip, thanks for joining today and providing a lot of insight and knowledge on the topic of dark social and more. Thanks for joining us for episode 1. Don't ever put soda or tonic water into a shaker. I don't know what I was thinking.
I was curious.
I wasn't thinking. I was just going for it to mix the drink up. But if you learned anything today, do not do that. Thanks for joining the Attend Star Happy Hour podcast again. I'm Brennan Robinson. Here with me is Philip Wilhelm, and we'll see you next time.